Hello, everyone, and welcome to Painless Universal, a conversation with myself and Welsh. Today, we'll be talking about mental health pain. It is a challenge that so many people will be dealing with, especially now. This is a crucial time to talk about it because the more we talk about it, you then know you are not alone. I'll be talking to a specialist based out in India, Avina, Damania. She'll be telling me her strategy of helping people in India deal with mental health pain. It's a serious challenge that affects many. Let me give you a little bit of Avina's bio. Avina Damania is a psychologist mental health specialist trained at City University of London. She's awarded an EU scholarship and representation award from the deans of the university. Avina's earliest experience of mental health counsel began in 2014 when she started to volunteer as a counselor at charities in Mumbai. She did this alongside her bachelor degree in psychology. And after this, Avina continued to educate herself and acquired an MSc in mental health from the renowned City University of London. She worked with various organizations. She has experience with adult, adolescents, and children. Her primary areas of expertise are depression, anxiety, anger, stress, among other issues. She's been featured in India Express, the Midday radio shows, the City University London page as a successful alumnus. During the pandemic, she worked with the Mumbai police to train female constables in their counseling. She's also the founder of The Mind Essential, a platform for online counseling and mental health. Today, I'll be talking to her about how she helps people with depression, anxiety, anger, stress, especially now with the COVID pandemic. Meet Avina. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Painless Universal, a conversation with myself and Welsh. As I've mentioned in the introduction, I've got Aviva here with me. Aviva and I have something in common. We both went to City University, and brilliant university in the UK. And she did mental health, which is a subject that is very vital right now. You did a MSc in mental health, and you've gone on to do bigger and great things with that skills. But before we even get into that, Aviva, thank you so much for joining me all the way from India. Whereabouts in India are you?
I'm from Mumbai.
Oh wow! I've been to Mumbai once. I'm really delighted to really catch up with you. I know it's time difference, and we were able to catch. But before we really go into it, Aviva, your story is really inspiring, and I would want to dive into each section of it. But before we really do that, can you just tell us a little bit about who is Aviva?
It's actually very funny because, who I am is actually my entire profession. So not professionally though, everything that makes me as a professional is what I am as a human being. So I'm going to just break it down now. So actually, since I was a child, I was always involved with a lot of charity and a lot of philanthropy, giving back to society. This was through my parents because they were always very involved with this. And I think that's where my love for kind of giving back and, the empathy and compassion, that's where it started. So it was always like me helping out in these charities when I realized that, maybe just making these, young children color is not the way. Maybe I want to talk to them about their emotions. So a very innocent little Aviva would unofficially counsel them by just listening to their problems and, hearing what they had to say, where they'd come from, the backgrounds that they were from, which were actually breaking. And I think then I started to realize that that's what I wanted to do. I loved to talk to people. I loved to help them solve their issues, by means of just listening with basic empathy. And that continued through my school life. I was always doing that. This was just my passion, and when I suddenly got into the field of psychology, which was in my junior year, that's when I knew that, okay, there's actually something that I can do with this unofficial empathy that I'm showing these people. So that became the love in psychology. And throughout this time, I was always very engaged in a lot of art and yoga, which also happened to be, therapy for a number of disorders in hospitals and things. So, I finished my degree and then I got a job at a hospital in Mumbai, which was actually practicing art therapy, music therapy, yoga therapy, which are all my hobbies. Yeah, so everything that I was doing in terms of my hobbies was kind of mingling with this therapy. So that's what I mean. It's a very beautiful sync where I'm doing exactly what I love every single day. So that's about me. And also now, once I was done with my hospital work, I went on to City University, which was, I think, a changing point in my career and my personality. And it was just a beautiful experience. After which I came back and I got a job counseling employees in an organization. And then I started my own little venture to kind of help people. We also have a CSR team that's doing a lot of charity work. So that's something that I'm trying to continue alongside whatever I do through my life.
And Aviva, that is one of the questions I really wanted to touch on, because I was inspired by people who go into mental health, because I think to go into mental health, you need to have that what you just really said is that empathy and compassion. You need to kind of understand human beings and why are they in that depressed stage, why are they stressed, why they suffering from anxiety. And you answer that question so deeply. When you started it at City, when you decided to take this on and say, okay, I'm doing this now full on, what was the nerves that was ticking into you? Because one thing is, I think a lot of people struggles that compassion, and now turning into a business and saying, I'm doing this actually not just as a compassion but also to help people. How did you move into that direction?
Into the business part of it?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was always doing jobs, like I mentioned, at the hospital and, with the employee counseling at the organization. But I started my little venture in the pandemic, in the midst of the pandemic, because I realized that during the lockdown in India, there was a surge in a lot of cases. I was getting a lot of new cases, which I couldn't take on because I had a full-time job. And also I had my old clients who I was extremely loyal to. So there was just so much that I could take on. So that's when I started the Mind Essentials, keeping in mind that now everything's going to be, virtual for a while. So you can't stop the sessions or the therapy because, you're locked in the house. So I identified a group of 15 counselors and psychologists, some who I had worked with in the past, some who I had studied with, and some just new people. So I identified them and I decided to kind of make it into a business. Having said that, it's not a stereotypical business with, profits. We keep the cost really, really low. I would say it's about, like £9 a session, which is extremely, extremely affordable. So that's what I would still call it a bit of a, non-profit organization. But yeah, that's how I made the leap. And it was more so because I couldn't say no to someone who came in and said, can I do a session with you? Can we start therapy with you? But of course, I have to be assertive with my own boundaries. So I didn't want to say no. So I said, I can't, but I can put you onto my team who will take good care of you. And I will be supervising that team. I will personally be, checking on them and seeing that they're doing everything perfectly. So that's how I sort of made that leap. But I was very certain that I wanted to do that, especially during this time of crisis.
Yes, this time of crisis, I think, is a shocker for everyone dealing with it. You focus on anxiety, depression, and stress. What are your, tactics to helping someone who's going through anxiety, especially during this time, because it's such a difficult time, especially now when there might be a second wave. I don't know, it depends where people are, but it's so difficult for people right now and people not knowing what to do. How do you advise people to get through it?
So, of course, there are a lot of things that I can say for different kinds of anxiety, because you may have health anxiety, you may just have general anxiety, you may have social anxiety. But what I always say is that if you're trying to help yourself, which is also fine, but it depends on, where you're at in your anxiety. So you have to kind of rank your anxiety. Am I feeling, a 5 on 10 anxious, or am I feeling a 10 on 10 anxious? So most of the time when you're feeling maybe from like a 1 to a 5, that's when maybe you can just use your self-help techniques. So for example, a lot of introspection and, logicking out the situation. For example, asking yourself, that is my response in proportion to the situation? Not trying to demean the anxiety, but sometimes, sort of logicking it out might make you realize that what seems so urgent is not indeed as urgent as you think. So that really helps, because that, the therapies that I mentioned before, I think, mandala coloring is very relaxing. I think yoga is very relaxing, a lot of deep breathing and breathing activities. Having said that, you will find so many of these options, even on the internet when you go and read. But what's very important is to have your own personalized anxiety tolerance toolkit. So, for example, if I know that I'm good with yoga, art, singing, and that's what makes me feel better, I should remember and keep a note on my phone, for example. So, when I am feeling anxious, I'm not probably going to remember what makes me feel good. So, if I have it on my phone, it's accessible. So, I open my phone, I look and I say, oh, yes, this makes me feel good. This makes me feel good. And then I have an instant thing to sort of uplift my mood. So
Go on.
so I think you have to just sort of identify what makes you feel good. And like I said, if it's above a 5 on 10, if your anxiety or your depression is above a 5 on 10, then it's probably time to seek some external help, because I feel like early intervention is always good. And prevention is also better than cure. So if there's no harm in going and getting some professional help, or speak to family or friends and kind of address that issue and see whether you would like to go for that or not.
The Mind Essential, your company, started this year, which is this is a brilliant time to start the company because of everything going on. How has that been? How's that taken off now, since you started this year, especially, yeah, in light of
I
everything?
think it's going really well, because we're not just doing this online counseling and online therapy, but what we're also doing is reaching out to a lot of schools and universities, and organizations, because I think after this pandemic, everyone has actually understood the importance of mental health. So the situation in India is a little bit different. It's not as open as it is, in other cultures. So it's still a little bit hushed. But due to this pandemic, I think people are talking about it so much more. Organizations are identifying that, yes, we do need a mental health on board, or we do need a psychologist in-house who can take care of our employees and their mental health. And likewise, in schools and universities, they're putting more sort of pressure on the school counselors. So we're doing that as well. We're reaching out to a lot of these universities, creating a lot of courses for schools, workshops, one-time things. Also, we realized that, having someone on the outside talk to students in a school is a lot more effective than having a counselor who's always in school, because they're usually perceived as authority, or you question the confidentiality in that situation. So we're targeting that. We're targeting organizations, and trying to help with time management and effective work-life balance. So there's a lot going on. And besides all of this, as I mentioned earlier, we also have a CSR team. So I'm trying to, sort of juggle between all of that, but it's going really good. I don't know if you read about the other work that we've done with the charity, but we donated, we're in the process of donating a lot of smartphones to students in a school called the Banyan Tree Center, which is in, I think, the second largest slum in India, in Dharavi.
Yeah.
So we're donating a lot of tablets, because it was a school, and they said that 60% of the students could not even access virtual education because they didn't even have smartphones. So they were still, that was lacking them from sort of getting the education that they need and they deserve. And it's already been about 6 or 7 months. So that's a lot of back and forth, in terms of what they're studying. So that's what we're working on now. And we also, at the same school, did another project where we fed 100 families. We gave them ration worth of, for like 4 people in family. So a family of 4 for a month. So that's also what we did. Then we were doing a lot of work with stray dogs. We were trying to target a lot of different, sort of causes. So in India, we have a lot of stray dogs on the streets. And, when there are people on the road, we all go and feed them. But when in lockdown, no one's feeding those poor dogs. So we had a small charity drive for that as well.
Wow.
A lot going on.
And what is really fascinating is that now we talk about mental health, but it's not a subject that people have been comfortable before. I know you did mention it briefly. There've always been a stereotype when you talk when people say mental health, people are like, oh, come on, get your thing together. What's wrong with you? But I think people are beginning to realize when people say mental health, it is a serious situation. How did you change that language? Being in India, almost like I'm from Africa, in Nigeria, is that language has not really fully been understood. Even in the UK where I'm based as well, it's now people are starting to talk openly about it and saying, when your mental health is good, you're good. You could do things. How did you change that language and get people to start understanding When you went to a business and saying to people, look, this is a very serious situation. You need to listen. You need to pay attention. Stop stereotyping. Stop being ashamed to even talk about
Yeah.
it. How did you take that leap jump?
So I think in general, because of social media, there has been a big jump in itself because people are talking about it a lot more here. So it has become better over the years. But there's one thing that I tell everyone, whether I'm on a webinar or a live, I always say that I feel personally that the reason why mental health has this sort of stigma attached is because we think of the word mental health as mental as in the adjective and not as in the abstract noun, which mental is an abstract noun, and you can have good mental health or you can have poor mental health, but you can't have mental health. So that's what I tell people, that that's what it is. And what I also strongly endorse is preventive mental illness. So I feel like you can prevent something from happening, and small things in your life can snowball into larger things. So that's how I sort of get people into therapy, and I tell them that it's normal, right? So very often when I'm in conversation with people and I say, oh, I'm really anxious, maybe I'm anxious because I'm sitting in a fast car, and then they look at me and they say, but you can't be anxious because you're a mental health specialist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I kind of get the time to educate and say that, okay, but a doctor can get cancer, or a doctor can get any illness, so why can't I have anxiety? I mean, having said that, I of course didn't mean it as an anxiety disorder, but
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong in a mental health specialist having any kind of illness, as long as it does not prevent him from being able to sort of deliver that kind of service. So that's also something that I say. But having said that, I feel at the end of the day, it's just when you want to learn more is when you're going to sort of educate yourself. As much as you, try and pursue people to sort of read up more or be a little bit more educated, they're not going to do it until they have that sort of personal experience involved, where a close friend or themselves or a close family member is sort of facing some kind of mental health difficulty.
One of the achievements is that you help the policewomen, the constable, I think, to
Yeah.
really help them, with their mental health during this COVID-19. Could you just explain a little bit what you did with them and how this COVID-19 affected their, impact on the work they were doing?
So first of all, to begin with, I really sympathized with our police force, because of course everyone was talking about how difficult the pandemic is and the lockdown is. But I kept telling people that, hey, at least we have a roof over our head. We're in the house. We're not forced to go out on duty and work and stand the whole day, in the sun, which is what the police force had to do. My heart really went out to them. And then I actually wrote to a couple of senior police officers and I heard back. And they said, why don't you come and help us with the mental health of the police officers? Because a lot of them, are scared that they will get COVID. So they, feel that, okay, what is this life? We are forced to go onto duty. What about us and our families' health? So they were obviously very upset and anxious, with a fair reason, of course. And then there were the police officers who were already affected, and there were a large number of them that were affected with the virus, a lot of whom's family was affected. A lot of them actually lost close family members because they were on duty. So it is a very, very sad situation. And I started to actually have counseling sessions with them on the phone. So every day I was sent a list of officers who I could speak to. And of course, they didn't have mental health difficulty per se, but it was just the anxiety because of what was going on, the circumstantial anxieties, and, stress and all of that. So there were lots of cases where they were scared to go back to work once they had recovered from the virus. Some of them were just very upset because they'd lost a lot of family members. It was just so many different feelings and so many different stories. So that's what I was doing on the phone with them. So I started off with Mumbai police, and then I went on to Thane police. It was the same thing where I was sort of having these sessions on over the phone. But then, of course, there were so many of them that were affected that, again, and I was single-handedly doing this. There was no one else in Mumbai who was doing this. So I said, okay, this is not going to be feasible once again, because like I mentioned, I had a job and I already had my venture called the Mind Essentials. So I decided that, okay, let me try and at least train the women. So there were these female police officers who were actually counseling, once again, counseling, but they didn't have the skill then. They were counseling the people who were affected with the coronavirus, the police, of course. So there was a training school which was actually converted into a hospital for all the police and their family that was affected with the virus. So I actually made a couple of visits there. I spoke with the female officers. I had a workshop for them, and I taught them how to sort of speak to these people and how, if they said something, what to say in return. So it was kind of like a practical exam where I said, why don't you tell me some of the things that they're telling you and let me show you how I would react. And this was, of course, in a class of many. So then all of them knew how to react to that particular situation. So I did a couple of classes of that, and that went really well because now there were about 15 more officers who were able to do this in the same way. Of course, having said this, it could not really replicate a professional, but they didn't require a professional at the point. They just needed a little bit of empathy and someone to talk to. So I thought that was a very smart way to get, to all the police rather than me trying and doing, a couple of counseling sessions a day. So yeah, that's about that.
Oh, no, that's amazing that you really help them because, we forget how difficult it is for people in the front line, doing their duties every day and not having time to think about the effect this whole virus has come on them. How has the media helped in Mumbai, India, or just in general? Have you utilized the media to communicate the mental health and have you used it as a tool to talk about the issues?
I have. I don't know if you've read my articles. I could probably send them to you after this call. But I wrote a couple of articles which were published in some of the best newspapers in Bombay, the Indian Express. I did a couple of videos for Midday, which is another newspaper. I did a few videos for Latestly, which is again another online newspaper. So I spoke a lot about, sort of the domestic violence that's going on. There were a lot of new cases that I had seen in my practice. Also increase in the older cases. So I did an article on that. I did an article on, self-harm, a number of things, about working from home, how you should work from home and manage your mental health at the same time. So yeah, I definitely use the media a lot. Having said that, I still think that the youth in India is not very, newspaper savvy. Everyone's on Instagram. So I think helped a lot. The online space is actually very useful here. Everyone's online, everyone's looking at things, wanting to comment and send it to their friends. But yeah, I think that definitely helped a lot. And besides the articles and the work that I had done for the media, I think in general, everyone was talking about it so much more. So I just hope that this continues, even if the pandemic settles, this is a topic that should be pulled and spoken about and not brushed under the carpet. So I'm really hoping that happens.
One of my final questions is about, if there's a second lockdown with families, kids having to stay home again, families working from home. Have you been able to help families deal with that stress, that transition period where they're now homeschooling their children and they're now working from home? It depends what space you are. Some people have, never had that space initially to accommodate this new lifestyle of working from home or, whatever you're doing. How are you helping the families, helping the children deal with their own stress level? Because I see one of the things you do, you actually work with children and as well work with families. How have you been able to help them through this transition?
So first of all, it's like two kind of family problems. I think the first family or relationship, let's just call it any relationship, because now whoever you stay with becomes your family. Mm-hmm. So, in some cases, you're separated from your families. For example, students studying in different cities or, just partners who are staying at their own homes. So there could be the separation, which causes a lot of family conflict because you've been away from your partner for so long, and it's a very different situation than meeting your partner or your family members every day. So in terms of that, the only advice that I constantly give is to stay virtually connected, to have very open conversations, and to start planning the future, because in times like these, times of uncertainty, your mind gets a little sidetracked. But when you remind yourself of the light at the end of the tunnel, that hey, this is a temporary setback, and after this we can plan this. Okay, let's plan let's plan where we're going to go, where we're going to go out to eat, what we're going to do. That kind of gives you that hope that, okay, better days are coming and there is light. So that makes you feel a little bit better. And now for people and families living together, I've always said that it's very important to both have your own space as well as spend time together. So it needs to be that perfect balance. So I've always told everyone that set an hour a day where, you have your own space. So even if you live in a very tiny house, keep a corner that's just for you when no one will disturb you. And that's your space for that 1 hour. And don't talk to anyone else. Do what you have to do. and kind of have to make an understanding with your family about that, especially in India where it's a collectivist culture. But that's a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
But yeah, so have that, and also, have that family time together where, you're probably looking at old photographs, arranging old things which you've meant to do for years and years and haven't gotten down to doing. So kind of get to that, look at those old memories, and do things that make you feel very good about the relationship that you have. Talk about old things that make you smile, bring a smile to your face. So do that. Also now, in terms of work from home, I've said that you have to keep those boundaries, because especially with the number of job losses and salary cuts, you don't want to be the subject of that. So prioritize that along with your household chores. So ensure that you're doing everything. You have to just mimic your routine, right? So what you would do normally, if you would wake up, have a shower, change into your work clothes, do just that. Sit to work, keep your station clean, keep it like your office desk, do all your work, effective time management. And when you're done, at whenever we get done, usually in India it's about 6 or 7 and sometimes later, but I've always said that keep that fixed time and then log out, put your computer away and then engage in your household duties and your self-care routines, and then involve your family in that, share the chores. But I think most important is to mimic usual routine, so that you don't feel that there's that much of a change. Of course it's going to feel like a change, but there are things that you can do to sort of make yourself feel better.
Yeah.
So that's what I suggest a lot of the time. I think that also, we tend to sort of not make the most of a situation. So I say that always, not just with families, of course, I mean, even in general about working from home, I tell people to think about the time when they were at work and they were longing for a holiday just to spend time with their family. So where is that person now? So try and think about that and visualize yourself at work, from to 10 a.m. to 7 in the evening, wanting to go home and just sit, for a nice long dinner with your family, and do that. And remember that it's not always going to be like this. So make the most of every second, every minute that you have with your family. And if you don't get along with your family, which is also completely normal, that happens in a lot of cases, in that case, just make sure that you're spending more alone time than time. And if you are spending together time, try and go back to maybe when your relationship suddenly started to get sour. Use this time to sort of make amends.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. This is
I
really.
mean, there's so much more I can say actually, but I think we'd probably run out of time if I just elaborate.
No. This is really, really very useful, because it's all about, there's a lot of pain going through people's mind right now, pain of not being able to cope, pain of not being able to deal with your family. You just don't want to be around them. Pain of being claustrophobic because you're at home, you're not allowed to do what you're used to. Some people are used to doing what they didn't love to do, but all of a sudden you're under this strict restriction. A final question is, how do you find joy at the end of, in all your mental health problems? How can you find joy?
I think this just goes back to why I chose this career. So for me, I think also for a lot of other people, I think everyone watching should actually try this. But I think doing something kind for someone else really makes you feel good, because it's kind of improving your self-perception. So your self-worth, because you feel that if you're helping someone else, that means you're worthy of something. That's just the backside of it, but that's truly how I feel, because after every counseling session that I have and after everything, I just feel so grateful for everything that I have. And I start to forget my own worries, because I feel like, okay, maybe my worries are not as big as I think, because there are so many people facing so many things that are so much bigger than mine. Of course, I wouldn't compare problems between two people, but that's what works for me and makes me feel like my problems aren't as large as I feel. And yeah, I think just having that compassion and being able to, and I definitely tune out, of course, in this profession you're trained to sort of tune out of after all of that. But of course there are days when especially if it's someone I know, and if they tell me something, if someone I know closely, of course, and I probably feel a little low, that's when I just go back to what we spoke about earlier, the anxiety tolerance toolkit. So I'll have this list of things that I do. So I love art and I love music, love yoga. So I go into all of that and then I instantly feel better. But I definitely think this is something everyone should try. I think, kindness is really underrated. It actually helps you more than it helps the person you're being kind to. So that's something I strongly advocate.
Wow. No, thank you so much, Aviva, for this wonderful, you gave us real insight in case there's a second wave, even if there's not a second wave, just in our own self, how to be, that will help improve our mental health so we could be better people, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it because, not just have you shared your experiences, you shared your own journey, and you also shared how do you help other people along the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.